Every morning, the subway car groaned to a halt at exactly 7:18 a.m. at the downtown terminal, and every morning, without fail, the same figure stepped into the last car. He wore a plain black beanie, a faded hoodie that had clearly been washed 100 times, and well-worn boots that had seen too many winters. No one recognized him, not because his face was unremarkable, but because it was hidden. The man kept his head slightly lowered, his eyes shielded by the soft brim of his cap, and his posture folded inward, as if trying to disappear into the crowd. The city moved fast, faces changed daily, but he remained a fixture on that route, like a ghost only a few ever noticed. He never spoke, not to the officers at the station, not to the loud teenagers brushing past, not even when someone bumped into him with a hot coffee or stepped on his toes. He would just nod quietly, maybe offer a slight, almost imperceptible smile. He always chose the same seat, second from the left, third row, unless someone else needed it more. If the subway was full, he stood calmly, arms relaxed, never clinging to the handrails, as if his balance came from somewhere deeper. His silence was not cold or distant, it was reverent. He was fully present in the chaos, observing without judgment. Most assumed he was just another tired New Yorker, until one woman began to notice the patterns. Leila was a junior graphic designer working late hours and sleeping little. The subway was her daily sketchbook. She doodled faces, sneakers, glances, and brief moments of humanity that flickered like fireflies between strangers. But the beanie guy was different. She had started seeing him almost every day. Always in that spot, always quiet, always alone. But what truly caught her attention was the way he moved. Not like someone defeated or invisible, but like someone choosing to be humble. She had seen him give up his seat without being asked. She had seen him pick up a child's dropped toy and hand it back with a soft tap on the shoulder. He never looked for gratitude. He just gave. And that made her start drawing him day after day. First it was just sketches, quick lines, a hunched man with kind eyes, a jaw she couldn't quite place. Then one morning she noticed something that froze her pencil mid-stroke. When the train stopped and the man stood to let an elderly woman sit, he smiled, just briefly, and in that flash she recognized him, not from TV, not from ads, from stories, from whispers. The way he bowed his head in interviews, the way he listened more than he spoke. Her breath caught in her throat. "No way," she whispered to herself. "Is that Keanu Reeves?" But she said nothing, unsure if it was just imagination or truth dressed in humility. From that day on, Leila knew. This was not just a subway ride. This was the beginning of something incredible. It began to feel intentional. How he always chose a seat only to surrender it moments later. On a particularly frigid Tuesday, a mother holding a stroller stepped in, her face tired and tense from the morning rush. Before she could even scan for a spot, he was already rising, his hand gently gesturing toward his seat with no word spoken. She hesitated, unsure whether to accept, but the look in his eyes, genuine, warm, and deeply grounded, melted the awkwardness. She nodded, murmured thanks, and sat down while he stood silently, now holding the metal pole with a kind of grace that made Leila pause mid-sketch. This was not a man reacting out of habit. This was someone who noticed, someone who chose kindness as a lifestyle, not an event. Leila began tracking the pattern. It was always someone else. The woman with 2 shopping bags whose fingers trembled from the weight, the young man with a leg brace trying to balance on one foot, the old veteran in a worn navy jacket with eyes full of ghosts. Each time, before anyone asked, before any plea or glance could form, Keanu would stand. It was never dramatic. There were no words of self-sacrifice or attention-seeking grins, just a quiet movement, a fluid exchange, and a return to standing by the door like he was part of the subway itself. Even when the ride stretched long and the train jolted at sharp corners, he did not sway. His posture was strong, planted, like an oak tree offering shade in a concrete jungle. Most people never noticed, or if they did, they just saw another nice guy being polite. But Leila could not unsee it now. The way he observed every detail, who entered, who limped, who carried sorrow in their spine. He noticed pain, and not just the physical kind. One morning, she watched him offer his seat to a teenager who clearly was not injured, not tired, not burdened, just sad. A hoodie drawn tight, face buried in his phone, eyes dull. Keanu had seen it anyway, and when the boy sat down, visibly confused, Keanu gave a small smile, the kind that said, "You're not alone." Leila's chest tightened. She knew kindness when she saw it. But this was art. What fascinated her most was not the act itself, but the discipline behind it. In a world screaming for attention, he stayed silent. In a city where time is money and kindness costs too much, he paid in full daily. It made her question everything about celebrity, about ego, about the nature of goodness. Why was a man so admired for his on-screen roles, choosing to be invisible in real life? Why did he carry a heart like that without needing credit? She did not know the answers yet, but she knew this. She could not keep it to herself forever. Something about his habit, his ritual of noticing, of giving, was bigger than him, bigger than the train, bigger than the city, was a message, and Leila was beginning to believe it needed to be shared with the world. The decision to start filming him was not made lightly. Leila had always believed that some things were sacred. Moments of quiet humanity, unnoticed kindness, the invisible rhythm of city life. But something about the man in the beanie haunted her in the best way. She had sketched his profile more than a dozen times in her notepad, each version more detailed than the last. But the static lines on paper failed to capture what she truly saw. The movement, the subtle generosity, the silent timing of a man who did not need thanks to feel fulfilled. She hesitated for days. Would filming ruin the purity of it? Would it invade his quiet world? Still, a whisper inside her told her, this is worth sharing, not to exploit, but to remind. And so, with her phone held low and her screen dimmed, she began to record. Her first clip was shaky, unpolished. Just a few seconds of him giving up his seat to a pregnant woman. The woman's face, stunned and grateful, said more than 1,000 words. Leila did not zoom in, did not chase a perfect angle. She just captured it as it happened, as raw as it felt. Over the next few days, she continued filming. Only when the moment felt authentic. No staging, no dialogue, just kindness unfolding naturally, like morning light through a window. Her hand often trembled, not from fear of being caught, but from the overwhelming emotion of witnessing something so pure. Every time she pressed record, she felt like she was documenting something real in a world that had grown too rehearsed. With each clip, her sense of wonder deepened. She had captured him gently guiding an elderly woman away from the train gap. She caught him discreetly slipping a crumpled $5 bill into a child's dropped lunchbox when the parent was not looking. Once, she filmed him helping a blind man find a seat, whispering directions with such calm clarity that the man smiled before even sitting down. Leila could not believe what she was witnessing, and though his face was never shown directly, always turned slightly, always framed modestly, there was a growing feeling in her gut, like she was filming more than just a stranger. She was filming a lesson, a living reminder that compassion was still possible in a city too loud to hear itself think. Then, one morning, everything changed. She captured something different, something intimate. A woman entered the train, flustered, clearly late. Her hands trembling as she clutched a plastic folder bursting with documents. As the train jerked, she dropped the folder. Papers exploded across the car like birds startled from rest. People looked, but no one moved. Keanu did. He was already crouched down before the papers had stopped moving, gathering them with care, even shielding some from the dirty floor with his sleeve. Then he did something that made Leila stop breathing. He handed the folder back and slipped something inside it. Napkin. Later, the woman opened it. It had a small sketch. An open hand holding a flower. No name, just a soft pencil drawing. That was the moment Leila knew. She had to share him with the world. Not for clicks, not for praise, but because the world was starving for stories like his. The moment that changed everything happened on a gray Thursday morning, the kind where even the city itself seemed to move slower, drowned in mist and silence. The train was late, people were tense, the atmosphere buzzed with invisible static, as if the weight of the week pressed down on every shoulder. Leila almost did not take out her phone that day. She was tired, uninspired, and beginning to wonder if posting these small acts would even matter. But something in her stirred when she saw him step into the car again, still in his worn beanie, still carrying that mysterious stillness. He stood quietly, his hands tucked into the pockets of his faded coat, eyes scanning the car, not out of curiosity but out of care. That was the difference. He was never looking at people. He was always looking for people. A woman entered next, young, early 20s maybe, but clearly overwhelmed. Her eyes darted nervously. She held nothing but a paper bag, and she clutched it as if it were armor. She found a seat directly across from the quiet man in the beanie, and as she sat, the bag trembled in her hands. Leila hit record, sensing something. A minute passed, then two. The woman looked up briefly, her eyes glassy with unshed tears, and their eyes met. He smiled, gentle, unassuming. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. Folded napkin. He did not say a word. He simply handed it to her. She hesitated, unsure whether to accept, then slowly took it with trembling fingers. She unfolded it. Leila leaned forward from her seat across the aisle, trying to see. Was a drawing. A single rose, blooming from a cracked sidewalk. Pencil lines, delicate, heartfelt. The girl stared at it for a long moment. And then she broke. Silent tears rolled down her cheeks as she nodded at him, her lips parting in a whisper no one heard. Leila uploaded the video that same night. She titled it, "Kind Stranger Offers Hope in a Sketch." No names, no sensationalism, just a quiet caption. He rides the subway every day. He never speaks, but he sees people. By morning, the video had 200,000 views. By noon, it passed 2 million. Then came the comments. This made me cry. We need more people like him. Wait, is that who I think it is? One comment, barely upvoted at first, grabbed her attention. That's Keanu Reeves. Look closely. I met him years ago. He does this everywhere he goes. First, Leila thought it was a joke. Clickbait, wishful thinking. But then others chimed in. A former barista from Toronto, a bookstore clerk from Oregon, a woman who had once broken down on the side of the road, all with one thing in common. Stories about a quiet man who looked a lot like him, and always showed up when it mattered most. The internet exploded. People dissected the video frame by frame. They enhanced the lighting. They slowed it down. And the more they looked, the more undeniable it became. The smile, posture, the hands. It was him. It was really him. But what stunned the world more than the identity was the humility. An A-list actor, a global icon, riding the subway, giving up his seat, drawing roses for strangers. No entourage, no security, just presence, just heart. It was not a publicity stunt. It was not a campaign. It was a secret habit that somehow, quietly, broke through the noise of 1,000 viral dances and shock value clips. Leila watched it all unfold from her small studio apartment, her phone lighting up with interviews, requests, agents asking for exclusives. But she knew in her heart, the story was never about going viral. It was about a man who carried kindness in his pocket, like folded napkins, waiting for someone who needed it most. By the end of the week, the internet was on fire. Major news outlets picked up the story. CNN, BBC, and local New York stations all ran headlines like, "Hollywood star spotted living like one of us," and "Keanu Reeves' hidden subway life leaves millions in awe." Talk shows debated it, reaction videos flooded YouTube, and TikTok creators began sharing their own encounters with him, each one more heartwarming than the last. Some remembered him tipping waiters thousands without leaving a name. Others recalled him quietly buying meals for an entire homeless shelter on Thanksgiving. But none of those stories hit quite like the subway footage. There was something about that tiny, everyday setting, gritty, real, ordinary, that made his quiet kindness feel enormous, in a world addicted to spectacle. Here was a man who had been changing lives without an audience, and now, ironically, the world could not look away. The clip reached 50 million views by the following Monday. Celebrities began reposting it, some in disbelief, others in admiration. Twitter threads trended for days, not just about Keanu, but about the strangers in our lives we ignore. The silent heroes, the seek givers, the kindness bearers. Leila's phone did not stop buzzing. Brands offered her deals. Networks wanted her story. She declined most of them. Her inbox was flooded, not with business offers, but with thank you letters. People from Brazil, Japan, Egypt, and tiny towns she had never heard of wrote to say, "That video made me cry. I showed this to my son. We both hugged afterward. I haven't felt hope like this in years." It was bigger than a viral moment. It was a ripple effect, a collective exhale from millions who suddenly remembered what quiet goodness looked like. And yet, in the middle of the digital roar, one person remained utterly silent. Keanu. He did not release a statement. He did not comment or repost or correct the speculation. He did not show up on TV to explain himself or ride the wave of sudden publicity. Instead, he disappeared from the subway. For a few days, his absence was all people talked about. Maybe he's hiding now that the secret's out, one user speculated. Or maybe he never did it for recognition, wrote another. But then, without warning, a new video surfaced. A blurry cell phone clip from a different train line. A man in a beanie handing a small drawing of a tree growing out of a broken bottle to a tired nurse who had just finished a night shift. No words, just kindness. People knew then. He had not stopped. He had simply changed cars. Leila sat at her desk that night staring at her phone, flooded with emotion she could not quite name. Pride, gratitude, awe. She thought back to the first morning she noticed him, the silent figure in the crowd, the kind eyes beneath the beanie. She remembered thinking he was just another quiet commuter, and maybe that was the point. He was just another commuter, just another man. A man who chose to serve in silence when he could have stood above. She posted one final update. Not a video, just a note. He never asked to be seen, but we needed to see him. Within hours, it became the most shared quote of the month, not because it was profound, but because it felt like a mirror. For once, the internet was not chasing controversy. It was holding up an example of who we could be if we just looked up, if we just stood up, if we just carried a folded napkin in our pockets and asked nothing in return. The reaction was unlike anything the entertainment world had seen in years, not just in scope, but in tone. For once, the world was not buzzing about scandal, excess, or ego. Instead, it was quiet awe, the kind that made even the most hardened cynics pause. People around the globe started sharing their own small acts of kindness, tagging them with a hashtag like Keanu. A teacher in Dublin gave extra lunches to kids without asking who needed them. A delivery driver in Jakarta paid for a family's dinner and left without leaving his name. A grandmother in Detroit sewed handmade mittens and left them on subway seats for strangers. One gesture had created a flood, not of fame but of gentle power. The world was not just reacting, it was responding. Something deep and dormant had been stirred awake. Late-night hosts struggled to fit the story into a joke. They tried, but every time they paused the clip to laugh, the crowd stayed silent. 'Cause what could you joke about? A man giving away his seat, a celebrity drawing roses for strangers. The silence said it all. On talk shows, actors and politicians were asked about the subway footage. Some smiled politely, others choked up. One anchor, known for his hard-edged reporting, teared up on air as he read a quote. Kindness does not need to be loud to be seen. In a world addicted to noise, Keanu's quiet example became a kind of compass, not because it was extraordinary, but because it reminded everyone how extraordinary ordinary kindness really was when it went unfilmed. Until now, in a surprising move, public transit authorities in New York released a statement, not to confirm his identity, but to encourage riders to carry forward his example. Posters went up in several subway stations. A simple silhouette of a man in a beanie, standing with a napkin in hand with the caption, "Be someone's Keanu today." It became a cultural imprint almost overnight. Schools started using the video as a lesson in empathy. Therapists began referencing it in sessions to rebuild faith in humanity. One child wrote a letter to his principal, asking if they could create a quiet kindness club to honor people like the man in the video. And the most remarkable thing, none of it was orchestrated, none of it was planned, it was all just a reaction. The man, standing on a train, giving away a seat without asking for anything in return. Leila watched it all unfold with a strange mix of pride and humility. She was proud that her lens had become the world's window into something beautiful, but humble enough to know that she had only captured a moment. The real story was still riding the rails, quietly changing lives, one stop at a time. She never did reveal where he got off. She never tried to follow him. Some people asked, begged even, for her to do a follow-up, but she always said the same thing. This was never mine to control. I was just lucky enough to witness it. In a culture of exploitation and exposure, her restraint became part of the story's power. Keanu remained silent, but his silence had become louder than most people's shouting, and as the world turned its attention toward compassion, however briefly, he continued to move quietly among them. Same city, same rhythm, same folded napkin in his coat pocket. It took weeks for someone to finally get close enough to ask him the question the whole world wanted answered. Not a reporter, not a fan, just a middle-aged man in a faded Mets cap, riding the early morning train like he always did. He sat beside Keanu quietly, hands in his lap, unsure if the courage would come. The train rocked gently through lower Manhattan, the lights flickering now and then like an old heartbeat. After a moment of silence, the man cleared his throat and asked softly, "Why the subway?" Keanu turned to him slowly, no surprise in his expression, only a calm awareness that this moment would come. He smiled, not with his lips, but with something far deeper in his face. "Because it keeps me close," he said, "to real people. That's where kindness matters most." The man blinked, not expecting such a clear answer. "But you could go anywhere, be anywhere." Keanu nodded. "Exactly, which is why I come here." He gestured gently toward the humming car around them, crowded with tired workers, anxious students, and faces hardened by routine. "This is where people are unseen. This is where you can do something small, and it still matters." His voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but there was weight in it. Not the kind that demanded attention, but the kind that settled into the chest and stayed there. He did not speak of legacy. He did not mention cameras. He did not even acknowledge the viral storm swirling outside those subway doors. It was as if he had chosen long ago to be a quiet ripple in a noisy sea, and no amount of fame could pull him away from it. He shared how he had once been helped by a stranger himself. Many years ago, long before the fame, before the movies, when he was just another young man lost in grief and questions. "It was a janitor," he said, almost to himself. "I was sitting in a hallway in Toronto, broken, and convinced I had nothing left. This old man walks by, sits next to me, and offers me half his sandwich. Didn't ask what was wrong, didn't preach, just gave, and said, 'Sometimes people just need to be seen.'" Keanu looked out the window as the tunnel walls blurred past. "I never forgot that. I think I've been riding trains ever since, trying to be that guy for someone else." The man in the Mets cap did not speak after that. What could he say? There was nothing performative about Keanu's words. No moralizing, no spotlight. Just a human being who understood how loneliness could hide in a crowd, and how a small act, a smile, a seat, a sketch, could feel like a lifeline. As the train screeched to a halt, Keanu stood up, nodded to the man, and stepped off without looking back. The man sat there for several minutes after the doors closed, still hearing those words echo in his head. He did not take out his phone. He did not post a tweet. Instead, when the next stop came, he looked around the crowded car, spotted a woman standing with swollen feet and tired eyes, and he stood up. As the days passed, a quiet movement began. Digital detectives, subway regulars, and quiet observers alike started piecing together a hidden trail. Dozens of clips began surfacing online, not new but old, grainy phone videos, forgotten Reddit threads, blurry photos posted by strangers who, at the time, had not known who they were looking at, but the outline was unmistakable. The same beanie, the same posture, the same gentle acts repeated over months, years even. Keanu Reeves had not just ridden one subway or two. He had quietly become a fixture of public transport, not only in New York, but in cities across the world. Paris, Tokyo, Toronto, London, always alone, always present, always giving. The pattern was no longer speculation. It was a rhythm, a discipline, a ritual of kindness written into the rails of cities he passed through. Each city had its own stories, its own whispers. In Tokyo, a child once dropped his drawing on a station platform. A man in a beanie picked it up, folded it neatly, and added a small sketch of his own before handing it back. In Paris, an elderly woman struggling with her bags said she remembered a quiet stranger helping her carry them down the metro steps, then disappearing before she could thank him. In Toronto, a bookstore owner posted about a customer who bought 5 copies of a poetry book for 5 strangers and left notes inside each one, signed only with a small sketch of a tree. These stories, once random, now formed a mosaic, not of fame, not of legend, but of quiet, relentless grace. Leila watched these pieces come together with tears in her eyes. The world had always painted heroes as loud, grand, and unforgettable. But here was a man who had chosen to be forgettable, and in doing so, had become unforgettable. It was not just the acts themselves that left people moved. It was the consistency, the reliability of it. The idea that someone could choose to make goodness a lifestyle, not a performance. He had not done it once to be seen. He had done it always to remind others they were not alone. The more stories that surfaced, the more powerful his silence became, not because it concealed something, but because it revealed everything about who he truly was. A writer on a podcast said it best: Keanu Reeves is not a mystery, he's a mirror. We see what we long to believe about the world in him. The subway, the sketches, the quiet nods, they were not just gestures, they were threads. Subtle human threads tying people together in a time when most felt deeply untethered. And while the internet debated whether he would speak, whether he would make a statement or sit down for an interview, he didn't, because he didn't need to. The pattern was the message: seek given up, a hand extended, a napkin drawing left behind. In every city, on every train, there was now a small hope. Maybe today he would be there, and even if he wasn't, someone else might be. Someone who saw the pattern and decided to continue it. In her small Brooklyn apartment, Leila sat by the window with a single thought pressing on her heart. I need to thank him, not for the viral fame, not for the messages or the reach or the growth of her platform. She needed to thank him for reminding her that quiet mattered, that goodness could be soft and still change everything. As she stared at her sketchbook, pages filled with his posture, his hands, his quiet strength, she felt overwhelmed by the need to create something real. Not for the world, just for him. So she took out a fresh canvas, one she had been saving for months, and she began to paint. Not his face, not his fame, but the image that had haunted her since that very first subway morning. Keanu standing gently while everyone else sat, as if the still point of a turning world. She painted the crowd in soft blues and grays, city shadows layered in movement, anonymity and exhaustion. But in the center she placed him, tall, steady, and warm. She added no face, only the posture, the tilt of his neck, the subtle kindness in the bend of his shoulders. Behind him, on the bench he had given up, she painted dozens of folded napkins, each with a different small sketch: rose, tree, hand, a cracked heart stitched with thread. They were symbols of moments no one else would have remembered, but that lived on in those he helped. The scene felt still but alive, like a pause in a storm where something good finally takes root. When she finished, she stepped back, tears in her eyes. It was not a masterpiece in technique, but it was everything she had witnessed, everything he had given. She reached out through a quiet contact, a friend of a journalist who had once worked on set. No promises, no guarantees, just a hope that maybe, the painting would find its way to him. She wrapped it gently, leaving no note, no signature, only a title scratched softly on the back: The Man Who Chose to Stand. Weeks passed. She heard nothing. Life resumed. The internet moved on as it always did. New trends, new noise. The world kept spinning. But Leila felt settled, as if something in her had closed a chapter not with applause, but with peace. She never expected a reply. That was never the point. She just needed to say thank you, in the only language she truly knew. Then, one quiet Sunday morning, a knock came at her door. No delivery, no press, just a slim envelope taped gently to the frame. She opened it slowly, her hands trembling. Inside was a folded napkin, pencil lines, careful. It was a sketch of her, sitting in a subway car, sketchbook open, eyes wide, watching the world with wonder. And below it, just one sentence: "Thank you for seeing me, Kay." She sat down and wept, not from shock, not even from joy, but from the profound, quiet validation that comes when kindness circles back. It had never been about going viral. It had always been about being seen. And now, finally, both of them had seen each other. The following week, Leila boarded the same downtown subway she had ridden for years. Same platform, same time, same chilled steel poles wrapped in commuter fingerprints. But something felt different. The energy, once thick with anticipation and eyes darting toward the door for a glimpse of him, now settled into something more reverent, quieter. Keanu had not been seen since the letter. Rumors filled message boards. He left New York. He's in Berlin working on a film. He's somewhere riding another subway. But none of it mattered to Leila anymore. He had given the world something beyond presence. He had given it pattern. And patterns, once recognized, tend to live on, quietly repeated by those who saw their worth. As the train pulled into the station, she felt no urgency to scan the car. She knew he would not be there today. Yet somehow he was. She sat in her usual seat and smiled as she noticed a young man in a hoodie rise to offer his spot to a mother balancing 2 bags and a sleeping toddler. She watched an older woman hand a napkin-wrapped cookie to a stranger who looked like he had not eaten. And then, as the train pulled away from the platform, her eyes landed on the pole beside the door. Worn metal, scratched by time. But there, taped gently to its surface, was a folded napkin. Her breath caught. Slowly she stood, reached for it with trembling hands, and unfolded it with the care of someone handling something sacred. On it was a single black ink drawing, a blooming rose, its roots curling into the shape of a subway map. And beneath it, just 6 words, handwritten in small, neat lettering: "Kindness does not need a name." Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from the deep, aching beauty of what had been left behind. This was not closure. This was continuation. He had exited the stage, but his message remained, echoing through every seat given up, every quiet gesture, every stranger who remembered that someone once stood when they could have stayed seated. Leila folded the napkin carefully and placed it in her sketchbook, right beside her first drawing of him. She looked around the train and, for the first time, saw not commuters, but caretakers. Not just passengers, but people who had learned how to see. The train rocked gently forward. A new day began. Outside, the city churned with its usual chaos. Cars honking, sirens wailing, buildings reaching for the clouds. But deep underground, in the heart of steel and rhythm and everyday exhaustion, A single man's silence had planted something unshakable. Not a legacy, not a brand, but a living message passed from hand to hand, eye to eye, napkin to napkin. Somewhere, Keanu Reeves walked unnoticed, beanie pulled low, a pencil in his pocket, and a napkin folded carefully in his coat. And somewhere else, a stranger waited to stand up, not to be seen, but to see. Because now everyone knew. Sometimes the loudest thing a person can do is quietly care.